Sup, you beautiful bastards? Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. It is election day, so that means that today's show is a little bit different. And that's because, one, shortly after I upload today's show, right, this video, I'll be going live right here on this channel, right, youtube.com/DeFranco. First link in the description will take you to the watch page. And as of 3:30 p.m. Pacific, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, the live show will begin, and the little monkey icon I have will get a red outline. It'll say live. And depending on how things go tonight, I'll be live likely for 6 to 12 hours. And we're gonna be going through and breaking down everything together. And then two, today's show is gonna be different because we're gonna talk about some news at the top, and then I'm gonna tell you some stuff that you need to know for tonight's election results. Because there is a lot at play, more than you might even realize, and misinformation risks that are an all-time high, so there's a lot that we have to talk about. But with that said, buckle up, hit that like button, and let's just jump into it.
This is a news show.
And the first thing that we're gonna talk about today is Peanut the Squirrel. Now I know for those of you that are not chronically online like myself, that's gonna sound crazy, but this seemingly random apolitical squirrel has become one of the most political stories on election day. I'll explain, right? So this is 34-year-old Mark Longo. He's a guy in New York whose life changed forever 7 years ago. Because that is when, while crossing a busy street one day, he saw a mother squirrel get hit by a car.
As I got closer to the intersection, there was a little baby, and he was trying to cross the same street. So I tried to, step in front of him and get him out of the street, and instead of running away, he actually crawled up me. So that's when our journey began.
So Mark takes Peanut home, intending to care for him while he looked for a vet or a rehab, but no one would take little Peanut, so Mark did the rehab himself.
About 8 months into the rehab, I actually released Peanut back outside in hopes that he would live a nice wildlife and thank me for what we did. But unfortunately, a day and a half later, Peanut did get attacked. He ended up losing half of his tail, and he found his way home. And that was the end of Peanut's wildlife career.
Right, so after that, Mark gave up trying to get rid of his adorable little boy and just welcomed him into his home. And these two growing very close over the next 7 years, posting videos to Instagram, where they now have nearly 800,000 followers. Right, because who wouldn't love a video of Peanut doing tricks, jumping into his owner's arms, wearing bunny hats, and eating waffles? Also, with all of this, Peanut's social media fame directed a ton of traffic to Mark's OnlyFans page, where he makes content with his partner. And then, with that influx of cash, the couple bought a property last year in upstate New York and opened Peanut's Freedom Farm Animal Sanctuary. Right, this place where they care for around 300 animals, including horses, goats, and alpacas, although the star was always Peanut. And actually, as of several months ago, Fred the raccoon, who Mark rescued and brought indoors alongside Peanut. But then all of that came crashing down last Wednesday when the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation showed up to Mark's front door. Turns out, apparently they had received anonymous complaints about the animals' living conditions. And it turns out it's illegal to house wild animals as pets in New York without a license, so the state barged in and seized both Peanut and Fred.
10 to 12 DEC officers raided my house as if I was a drug dealer. I was sat outside my house for 5 hours. I had to get a police escort to my bathroom. I wasn't even allowed to feed my rescue horses breakfast or lunch. 4 departments and a judge signed off on a search warrant for a squirrel and a raccoon.
Right, so that news by itself, it had people outraged enough, but then, not long afterward, Mark posted this video to his Instagram.
Hi everyone. I don't know how I'm gonna say this. Peanut was the best thing that ever happened to us. And we got confirmation that they put him down. Please continue to help us raise money for the ongoing legal battles and for our nonprofit so we could keep Peanut's name alive.
So according to the state, Peanut bit one of the investigators during the raid, and so to test Peanut and Fred for rabies, the state euthanized both animals. And so, all of that, it happened last week, and it's been so long that I normally wouldn't cover a story that old. But then, because this is the United States of America, politics got involved. With Trump's campaign blaming what he called Democrat bureaucrats for needlessly murdering Peanut. And Elon Musk writing, the government should not be allowed to barge into your house and kill your pet. That's messed up. And adding, vote for Peanut, for liberty, for freedom.
They'll let in 600,000 criminals across our border. But if someone has a pet squirrel without a permit, they go in there and kill the squirrel.
They took the squirrel and murdered it for no reason at all.
They murdered Peanut the squirrel.
Democrats in the New York state government murdered a squirrel.
It is a microcosm of everything this election is about.
So I know Don's fired up about Peanut the squirrel. He was like, is it really the case that the Democrats murdered the Elon Musk of squirrels?
Now, I'm not saying Peanut's death just flipped New York, but you want to red pill America, raid their homes, and murder their pets.
But now it appears this has gone past some people trying to turn this into a rallying cry for Trump, with it being reported that 10 officers of the New York State DEC received bomb threats over the incident. And according to the Express Tribune, a woman reportedly admitted in a now private TikTok video that she was the one who reported Mark to the authorities. And this is another woman with a similar name who has no connection to the story, now says she's been getting death threats, hateful comments, and harassment from people who think she's the first woman. But then finally, to bring it back to the election, it's very weird that depending on how tonight or this week plays out, there's gonna be a number of people who think we got the outcome we did, either because of a squirrel or a roast comic. And if that's not just the fucking most American thing you've ever heard in your life. But then, before we get into the weeds about everything election night, let's talk about this celebrity surge we've seen over the last kind of 48 hours. Right, there's just been a massive wave of celebrity endorsements and pushes to get the vote out, with arguably one of the biggest coming last night from Joe Rogan. But he recently had Donald Trump and JD Vance on the show, and his most recent episode is with Elon Musk, and while promoting that interview, Rogan wrote, "The great and powerful Elon Musk, if it wasn't for him, we'd be fucked. He makes what I think is the most compelling case for Trump you'll hear, and I agree with him every step of the way. For the record, yes, that's an endorsement of Trump. Enjoy the podcast." And with that, while not surprising, you had outlets noting this could help Republican efforts to court young men at the ballot box. So obviously, that's a major one, but also in recent days, we've seen a number of celebrities speaking up. Billie Eilish at a recent concert in Atlanta.
Times are really scary, and a lot is at stake, and I know that if you're in this room and you support me, you support women, and I hope that you will vote for women's rights.
Big names showing up at Harris's final rallies, Katy Perry in Pittsburgh, Lady Gaga and Oprah in Philadelphia.
4 years ago, I became a mother. Best decision I ever made. Orlando and I, we welcomed our daughter Daisy, and she is the reason I am voting for Kamala Harris.
For more than half of this country's life, women didn't have a voice. Yet we raised children, we held our families together, we supported men as they made the decisions. But tomorrow, women will be a part of making this decision.
If we don't show up tomorrow, it is entirely possible that we will not have the opportunity to ever cast a ballot again.
And then on top of those sorts of things, you had tons of people getting the vote out. With, for example, Taylor Swift, who previously endorsed Harris, writing to her followers yesterday, "Here's a friendly but extremely important reminder that tomorrow is the US election and your last chance to vote." And the list kind of goes on and on, but also it wouldn't be a celebrity story if there wasn't at least a little bit of backlash. And that is actually where Rihanna comes into play, right? Because yesterday she posted a reel joking about how she wished she could use her son's passport to sneak into the polls, adding "vote cause I can." And in her caption, she also wrote, "When protecting pussies and firing pussies can happen all in one vote." So with that, there were a number of people that were not a fan of that joke, and we started seeing some back and forths happen. Right, in response to someone who said we need to make America great again because people like Rihanna want to cheat to win, she said, "LOL, when y'all stop burning ballot boxes, come check me." Then when another person said she should be arrested for trying to vote illegally, Rihanna simply just hit him with a "shut up, Karen." When someone else posted a whole paragraph about border security and told Rihanna to stick to music, she said, "Where were you on January 6th, sis? Stick to your discounted crotch. We out here fighting for its rights." With it right now looking like some of the comment threads have since been removed, but they've still gone viral. But all of that is probably just a small taste of the back and forth discourse we will be seeing on the internet for the next week or two or forever, especially depending on which way this election goes tonight. And then, so listen up, this is incredibly important for election night. I may even play this once or several times during our election night live stream, because I want to prepare you. On election night, you're gonna see a common trend across swing states. Very likely, Donald Trump will lead early on, and then Kamala Harris will suddenly start to catch up. And this isn't, as MAGA folks will suggest, proof that the Democrats are cheating in the election by dumping fake ballots, but instead it is a well-known phenomenon called the red mirage or blue shift. Now, in some ways, it might be slightly less pronounced this year, especially when you compare it to 2020, but in others, there are new rules in place that could help fuel conspiracies and lead to demands that votes stop being counted. So the question, why exactly does this illusion happen? Well, there are a few factors at play, like that rural areas, which often lean Republican, finish counting faster than urban areas, which are usually Democrat. Also, on top of that, Republicans usually favor in-person voting on the day of the election, while Democrats tend to prefer mail-in or early voting. Although a key thing is there might be a slight shift this year, as it seems that more Republicans have considered using early voting, with many states reporting upwards of 50% of registered voters using that method. So that's eaten away at mail-in voting, although those votes are still very likely to be instrumental in the election. And in both cases, there are often new rules in place that delay when those votes are counted, especially in battleground ones, where they're generally not allowed to be tallied until election day itself. And in the most extreme cases, things like mail-in ballots, they're not even tallied until after the polls close. So there's just piles of ballots sitting with poll workers that aren't allowed to be looked at or counted well until the day starts. Right, so when you hear stories about boxes full of ballots being dropped off, that's usually why. They're just being delivered in chunks to polling places for later count, all of which ends up being used by conspiracy theorists to say that fake ballots are being dropped off. Right, even Trump said that counting ballots after Election Day was an issue back in 2020, and many of his supporters have continued to push for all ballots to be counted on Election Day itself or not count. And this year, I mean, they're gonna be in for some disappointment because pretty much every swing state has already admitted that they likely won't even have unofficial results by the end of the night. Because again, despite states getting these ballots early, workers are often not allowed to count them until Election Day itself. That's why you have folks like Georgia's Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, already warning that the ballots there will not be fully counted until after Election Day. And notably, that is partially because of rules that his fellow Republicans have put in place. Things like that mail-in ballots couldn't be counted until 7 a.m. today, and they have to stop at 8 p.m. tonight. But then, by 10 p.m., there needs to be a tally of all the uncounted ballots so far, presumably to stop any extra ballots from finding their way into the total. Although with that, only one candidate so far has a history of openly and shamelessly asking for more votes to come out of thin air. And this, as surely it's a coincidence that the rules that make it easier to claim that ballots are being counted too slowly were passed by Trump allies after 2020. And the thing is, Georgia might be a fast example. Right, in Arizona, officials are warning that it could take between 10 to 13 days to get an official count done. Now, that being said, we still might have a good idea by the end of the night, but if it's close, especially with how many votes are still outstanding, it might be some time before we know. And part of the reason for that is while the state processes and counts mail-in ballots as they're received, it doesn't do this on Election Day. Instead, those are counted after the polls close at 9 p.m., not to mention that the state has a massive ballot this year that's 2 pages with 13 statewide initiatives that are expected to slow down counting. Though with all this, one of the big real fears is what happens if multiple battleground states are all too close to call and we end up with more Trump supporters trying to storm the areas where election workers are counting ballots and demanding that they stop the count. Which, if you don't remember, yes, it did happen in 2020. And all of this is everyone is expecting a legal mess. I mean, Trump and his team have long been preparing themselves to fight contested elections, and in many cases have already done so. Like in Pennsylvania, for example, where the state Supreme Court ruled that people with rejected mail-in ballots are allowed to vote provisionally, with that getting sent all the way to the US Supreme Court, which ruled on Friday that those rules could stay in place. And in some ways, situations like this could make 2024 fundamentally different from 2020. Right? There are new laws in places across the country that expedite and streamline these election-related lawsuits, which is generally seen as a good thing because the last thing anyone wants is a repeat of 2020. Or, I mean, even 2000, where the Supreme Court stepped in with one of its most controversial decisions ever and forced Florida to stop counting ballots to give Bush the win. And so that actually kind of brings us full circle. The demand that states stop counting ballots, it's not without precedence, and it clearly can be game-changing. So in a zero-sum way, and understand I'm being very specific there, it makes strategic sense why Republicans would want to set up election rules so that things like mail-in voting are counted later and slowed down. Right? One, if those votes could be ignored, it'd be a massive win for them. And two, even if they don't win any lawsuits to block the votes from being counted later, even casting the doubt about them, it's clearly done irreparable damage to our democracy. And so again, I just want to make sure that everyone was aware of this. So please share the word for the full video explanation that I just gave. I got a link in the description that you can send out as well. And honestly, it's just about getting information there. I don't give a shit if you rip that video and post it somewhere. Because there's no reason to believe that the misinformation that people are throwing around out there right now is going to stop or slow down. But then, taking a quick break from the news, I gotta say, it has been fun for me to learn about how you guys are using your SeatGeek winnings. From concerts and Broadway shows to sporting events, our weekly SeatGeek $500 giveaway lives on, and you beautiful bastards are crushing it. Also, for the uninitiated, SeatGeek is the #1 rated live event ticketing app with over 28 million downloads and access to a wide array of entertainment to get you and a loved one out of the house. Right, my team worked with SeatGeek to extend the $500 weekly giveaway, and if you haven't entered yet, do it. I mean, next week's winner could be you. It's simple. You just add code PDS to your SeatGeek account, you get $10 off, and you could be one of our weekly lucky winners. That's $500 in credit towards any of SeatGeek's 70,000 events. And then also, if you're new to SeatGeek, you can add code Phil for $20 off your first purchase. But again, SeatGeek veterans can add code PDS, which gets you $10 off any purchase. And again, you'll be entered for your chance at the $500 SeatGeek credit. No purchase necessary. But then, with so much actually happening with this election, I wanted to give you a breakdown of the state of play about the Senate, the House, and the presidential race. Starting with the Senate, because if you thought the presidential race was close, I mean, the balance of the Senate, it's even closer. So a little background here, right? The Democrats currently have a very narrow majority, leading Republicans 51 to 49. With that lead, thanks to the fact that 4 states have independent senators that caucus with the Democrats. And so with the elections that are happening this specific cycle, I mean, the Democrats are hanging on by a thread. It could very easily flip. In fact, 538 predicted as of Friday, the Republicans could take a very narrow holdover. And this is there are over 30 seats up for grabs, though most believe that it's going to come down to about 10-ish key races. So let's unpack some of those, especially because because every news outlet is kind of considering these races a little bit differently. But we'll start with the 4 that are considered true toss-ups as of last Thursday by the New York Times and Cook Political Report: Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. So in Ohio, we have Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown defending his seat against Republican challenger Bernie Moreno. And this race has been so damn expensive. It has had more ad spending than any other race in Senate history, beating the $412 million we saw in Georgia back in 2020, that expected to even pass $500 million. And the polling leading up to Election Day has been tight, right? The New York Times polling average has had Brown leading 48 to 46, a local poll from the University of Akron having him ahead 46 to 44. And that poll specifically found that even though he's a Democrat, Brown has been able to pull Republican women who intend to vote for Trump, with places like NBC trying to explain the closeness of this race by saying Brown's survival and possibly partisan control of the Senate hinges on split-ticket voters in a state that twice backed former President Donald Trump by healthy margins, and likely will again. But then, over in Michigan, we have 2 candidates vying for an open seat. You have Republican Mike Rogers and Democrat Alyssa Slotkin. Right, and Slotkin, she's currently a U.S. representative, and Rogers is a former representative who was in office from 2001 to 2015. Also, for some background here, no Republican has actually won a U.S. Senate seat in the state since the 90s, but the polling here is super tight, with the Detroit Free Press having Slotkin ahead by 5 points, but the poll has a 4-point margin of error. Though also, the New York Times has averaged Slotkin pretty consistently at 5 points ahead since October, right now at 49 to 45. Now, for her part, Slotkin's been touting her ability to work across the aisle because she's worked in national security roles under both the Bush and Obama administrations. Meanwhile, you have Rogers saying that he's running on fixing the shortcomings in Washington under this administration. But then, of course, all eyes are going to be on Pennsylvania, especially with incumbent Democrat Bob Casey going against Republican challenger David McCormick. And here, the Cook Political Report actually previously considered this race a lean Democrat, but in late October, it switched it up to a toss-up. And so you have the Associated Press saying this is shaped up to be the toughest race of Casey's Senate career. And this is the Hill had Casey leading 48 to McCormick's 45.8%. The New York Times average also has incredibly similar figures, which is notably closer than the 49 to 44 point lead Casey had in early October. And this is also another race where abortion has come up as a major issue. And then that brings us to the last toss-up, which is Wisconsin, where you have Democrat Tammy Baldwin defending her seat against Republican businessman Eric Hovde. There, an October poll from Marquette Law School had Baldwin ahead by 2 points, and the New York Times average has her similarly leading 49 to 47. With this, you have outlets like CNN reporting that this race has hit a lot of hot-button issues like abortion and immigration. Also saying the race is, quote, devolved into one of the most personal and nastiest affairs in the country. Baldwin is notably the first out gay senator, and she's accused Hovde of trying to remind voters of her sexuality. Right, in this, because he's run ads noting that her partner is a financial advisor and claiming it's a conflict of interest because she has high-end clients. But there, fact checks have found no evidence for claims that Baldwin has used her role in the Senate to boost her partner's wallet. And this is Hovde has also taken heat for his own finances because he's the CEO of a $3 billion bank, and Democrats have also been quick to note that he has a $7 million home in Laguna Beach, right, and using that to paint him as out of touch with others in the state. Right, and so those are generally considered the big 4 as far as the Senate, and then also you have other key races in states like West Virginia. In West Virginia, because Joe Manchin has stepped out, and that seat is now almost guaranteed to go to a Republican. And specifically, you've got Republican Governor Jim Justice running against Democrat Glenn Elliott, a former mayor in the state. And here you have 538 simulations saying Justice is far more likely to win, and outlets like CBS even saying the Democrats have all but ceded to the other side. Then, in Arizona, you have voters yet again finding themselves dealing with the thickly layered lunacy and foundation of Kari Lake, with that being the race to replace Kyrsten Sinema, and Republican Lake is going against Democratic Representative Ruben Gallego. Here, you have the Times saying this one leans blue, noting that Lake lost the governor race back in 2022, and then went into fits falsely claiming the election was stolen. And so at the very least, I would say Lake is a very divisive figure in the state, and right now, Gallego is leading her in polling averages by around 5 points. But then, you have Texas leaning red right now, with Ted Cruz seeking a 3rd term, leading challenger Colin Allred 49 to 45. Now notably here, no Democrat has won a statewide election there since the 90s, but also Cruz only won his last re-election by 3 points, and you have Democrats hoping that maybe Allred's a stronger challenger than Beto O'Rourke. Though again, the consensus is that it is leaning Republican. Then in Nevada, you have Democratic incumbent Jackie Rosen and Republican Sam Brown. Here, as of last Friday, you had Rosen leading the polls 49 to 44. And notably here, in the last decade, the state has kept its senators blue, but it went for a Republican governor last election, so there is room for it to move. Then in Montana, you have CNN describing Democrat John Tester as the most vulnerable Senate incumbent this year. And there we've seen Republican Tim Sheehy leading him by 4 points in the polls. And CBS explaining that recent population growth in the state has actually helped Republicans, making it harder for Democrats to keep their seats. Then in Nebraska, you have Republican Senator Deb Fischer running for re-election against an independent, Dan Osborne. And here, you have places like the Times noting that Nebraska, yes, is a red state, but you have Osborne testing out a pro-labor and working class message that is making the race a lot closer than a lot of people initially assumed it would be. Because surprisingly, he's only trailing Fischer by about 3 points. But then, with all of that said, let's talk about the other half of Congress, right? The House of Representatives. Because shocker, we're also looking at a ton of tight races. So let's talk about the state of play with the House of Representatives. Right now, it has a Republican majority, but only by a little. They have 220 and you need 218 for a majority. And notably, this is both Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and Donald Trump have openly admitted to having a secret with one another. You have some scared that that secret is them scheming a plan to try to steal the election, and maybe Mike won't certify the election results if Kamala wins. And so for that, and a number of reasons, balance of the House is key. Especially because if Democrats were able to take over, they would have the majority, and that little secret, it could potentially lose its power. Now with the House, because all 435 seats are up, I'm obviously not gonna be talking through all of them, but I will try to hit you with the highlights. So starting with Orange County, California, you have California's 47th district up for grabs. It used to be Katie Porter's seat, but now you have Democratic State Senator Dave Min going up against Republican business owner Scott Baugh. And here, according to the LA Times, Democrats have a voter registration edge over Republicans. The Cook Political Report also saying that it leans blue, but some polling has found Baugh slightly ahead. And there, Politico explaining, this seat remains swingy in the previous GOP stronghold of Orange County. Baugh narrowly lost a bid against Porter 2 years ago, while Min came up short in a prior bid for Congress. You also have Republican incumbents fighting to hold onto their spots in the 13th, 27th, and 41st districts. And polling from USC back in September found a virtual tie in the 41st district. But also, make no mistake, all are considered very close and could determine the fate of the House. Then, in New York, the 17th district is definitely one to watch. It was previously held by a Democrat, but they lost it back in 2022. And so Republican Mike Lawler's defending it against its previous holder, Mondaire Jones. Right? And people largely see this one as necessary if Democrats want to try to get back control. Also, over in Long Island, you have a Republican hoping to hold his seat in a rematch against a Democrat. And this is there is a reason to believe that these races could shift blue, because as Lawrence Levy, the executive dean of the National Center for Suburban Studies at Hofstra University, told The Guardian, we had kind of a mini red tide in New York in 2022 that was related to post-pandemic issues that brought a surge in crime, inflation, and other things, so that folks who normally vote Democratic came out for Republicans. But what you also saw was a surge of turnout among Republicans and a drop-off among Democrats. The turnout model in a presidential year is very different. You're going to get many more voters, many more Democrats who only come out in presidential years. But of course, we'll have to wait to see, like with all of these. And then let's talk about Pennsylvania, because as always, it's super consequential. And as far as the House, it has 3 House district races that are considered toss-ups. One of those is the 10th district, where Republican Scott Perry is seeking re-election after 6 terms. But this, as reported by CBS News, challenger Janelle Stelson was endorsed by Republicans for Harris, and she's been going after him hard, right? Running ads about him not living in the district and going after him for defying a subpoena related to January 6th. Then another toss-up there is the 7th district, which has a history of choosing the president. I mean, it is a true swing district. Biden only beat Trump back in 2020 by 49.7% to 49.1%. And then the last toss-up there is the 8th district, with the Democrats seeking re-election and holding the seat since 2013. So there, Republicans do believe they stand a chance of flipping it. Then, in Virginia, you have most people talking about the 2nd and 7th districts. Here you have NBC News saying the Democrats have the possibility of flipping the 2nd district, and if they do, the outlet says that it could be an early sign that the party is going to have a good turnout elsewhere. But it is far from guaranteed. I mean, you have the Times actually reporting that it is leaning red. But it does have the 7th as a true toss-up, right? The seat is open, no one's defending it, and the 2 people fighting are Democratic candidate Eugene Vindman, who's notably the twin brother of Alexander Vindman, which also, I will say there are potentially a lot of voters confused about who is running. And so some have tied either support or dislike of candidate Vindman to the actions of his brother, who testified against Trump during his first impeachment trial. And that could possibly help GOP candidate Derek Anderson, as the partisan nature of the impeachment could alienate some voters. Which I will note here, because it was reported, right, Eugene Vindman, the candidate, was involved in the impeachment, but he wasn't the main character like his brother was. So this also, as the Post has said, it's unlikely that this confusion will fully sway the outcome. But again, we're talking about it because it is a toss-up race and it'll be one to watch. But then, hopping to Wisconsin, the 3rd district there is definitely one to watch. There you have Republican Derek Van Orden defending his seat after a lot of controversy during his first term. Among other things, he shouted at Biden during the State of the Union, and he also faced backlash for yelling and cursing at high school-age Senate pages while they were touring the Capitol. And here you have Democrat Rebecca Cook challenging him by running as a moderate, hoping to appeal to those who were turned off by those controversies. And while there are things like a Huffington Post poll having her leading by 1 percentage point back in October, the Times still has it leaning Republican. Then moving on to Texas, you have people saying that the 34th district is a major sign of where the Latino vote hangs in the state, and very importantly with that, the potential for it to move to the right. Now, the Times has had it leaning to the left, and outlets like NBC have also said that it's more likely to go that way too. But Republican Mayra Flores is challenging incumbent Representative Vicente Gonzalez by leaning into far-right rhetoric at a time when Trump could make gains in the Latino community. With, for example, USA Today explaining that South Texas has been a Democratic stronghold for a while, but Republicans have been slowly making inroads into South Texas, and this district could be a bellwether in that effort. Finally, for House races we're talking about, we go to Arizona, because Arizona has 2 districts that are considered toss-ups by the Times. The 1st and the 6th. Both have incumbent Republicans, and in the case of the 1st district, you have incumbent David Schweikart going against Democratic former lawmaker and ER physician Amish Shah. It is the wealthiest district in the state. It is a toss-up, but somehow the 6th district it seems even closer. It's a rematch between Representative Juan Ciscomani and Kirsten Engel. And in 2022, he beat her by less than 6,000 votes. And so now this time around, it's tied within the margin of error, with Engel notably trying to run on reproductive rights, as that's going to be a key issue for the state elsewhere on the ballot. And again, there are more House races at play here, but I just wanted to at least highlight those. But then finally, obviously, we're looking at the presidential race. That's where understandably all eyes are. Here, there's been plenty of national polling, though that really doesn't matter because of the Electoral College. But you also have places like 538 Simulator saying that Kamala Harris wins 50 times out of 100 while Trump wins 49. And this after it previously had Trump winning 52 times out of 100 and Harris 48 times. Statewide polling generally very close. So this, of course, is over the weekend before Election Day. We saw a very highly rated outlier poll, with that coming from Ann Selzer, who has a very good track record as far as what the vote is going to be in Iowa. And there, while you had many people expecting her poll to find Trump up +5 or +7, it ended up actually being Harris +3. With many people saying the big story there isn't actually Iowa. But if the polling was accurate, it might mean that a lot of people are breaking for Harris right near the end. So they're either going to look really smart or their rating is going to be going down. But again, polls are polls. Votes are votes, and votes are the only ones that matter. We're gonna have to wait to see how it all shakes out. But that, my friends, is the end of your Tuesday Philip DeFranco show. And again, big reminder, depending on when you're watching this, it may have already started. I'll be live streaming the election results tonight. I got a link in the top description. If I can, I got you right here. You can click or tap. But with that said, I just wanna say thank you for watching. I love yo faces. Be safe out there, and I'll see you soon.